My name is Evelyn Carter, and 3 days ago, a judge dropped his gavel when he heard my kitchen recording. That was the moment he realized I wasn't confused. I was prepared. It started when a pharmacy called to confirm a prescription I never take. The doctor's note said I might show signs of confusion. That's when I knew someone was trying to make me sound crazy on paper. The next morning, an HOA notice appeared on my door for a renovation I never asked for. Under my welcome mat, a realtor flyer waited. Trent says you're ready when we are. Ready for what? To lose my house. I opened the red binder that holds my entire life, deeds, passwords, every receipt that proves I'm still here, and I began tracing the scam. The fake fax number, the change of address I never filed, the care home that had my name on its list before I even heard of it. By Monday, my own son-in-law filed for emergency guardianship, claiming I wasn't fit to live alone. On Tuesday, we played my kitchen recording in court. They called it help. I called it theft. This is the story of how I fought back, not with anger, but with proof, paper, and a binder full of truth. The Thursday everything began, the phone rang a little before 9. I answered with my shoulder while I tied my robe belt, the way you do when you've answered phones your whole life. "Harbor Pharmacy," a cheerful voice said. "Is this Mrs. Carter? This is Billy." "Yes, ma'am," because it never hurt to be polite. "I just wanted to confirm your refill on gabapentin. It came in with a note from your doctor to watch for increased confusion. We can have it ready this afternoon." I went quiet enough to hear the soft click of the second hand on the kitchen wall clock. "I don't take gabapentin," I said careful, "and my doctor has never used the word confusion about me." Billy hesitated, then lowered her voice the way a friend does even when she's paid by the hour. "It came through a sax with your name and date of birth. Maybe there's been a mix-up." "I don't think it's a mix-up," I said, and for a moment I stared through the glass at the lemon tree, bright and ridiculous against the gray morning. Would you mind reading me the fax number on that request?" She did. I wrote it on the back of a Penny's Diner napkin I keep near the phone for notes and grocery lists and thoughts that run away if you don't snag them by the tail. When I hung up, I noticed a neon sticky note curled against my back door. HOA pre-renovation walkthrough Monday 9 a.m. I hadn't requested anything from the HOA. Under my welcome mat, a glossy flyer waited like a smirk. "Get top dollar for your Maple Harbor cottage. Pre-market buyers standing by." At the bottom, in ink just showy enough to be personal, someone had written, "Trent says you're ready when we are." I stood in my small kitchen, smelling the ghost of coffee and old toast, and felt something I recognized from 100 small moments across a long life. The way your gut knows a storm is coming, even when the forecast says clear. There are a dozen ways to call it, hair raised, sixth sense, but I've always preferred a nudge. The nudge said, "Move." That evening, my daughter arrived in a cardigan the color of new money, carrying takeout from the Thai place I liked best. She talked too fast when she set the cartons down, and she refused the chair across from me, as if sitting meant staying. "Mom," Kim smiled with effort, "Trent found the sweetest community, just in case we ever need it, Cypress Grove. They have live music in the afternoons and a bird room. The residents can hold finches while they listen to Sinatra. Doesn't that sound safe?" "Memory care?" I asked and kept my voice level. "Don't be dramatic," she said lightly, but her knuckles went wide around the fork she hadn't used yet. "Mom, we're just trying to make it easier for you." "Is that what we're calling it now?" I asked, and she looked away. After she left, I pulled the red binder out of the hall closet. My late husband, Ray, used to call it my brain outside my brain. He teased, back when teasing was a kind of affection in our house, that if the tornado ever came, the first thing I'd grab would be the red binder, and then maybe him if he was standing close enough. He wasn't wrong. Inside the binder lived everything I thought I might someday need to prove who I was and what I meant to do. Bank statements, reprintable checks, photocopies of my driver's license and social security card, a copy of my living will, and the durable power of attorney we'd drawn up years ago. the deed to my small blue house and the tax bill, a list of neighbors with phone numbers and the names of their dogs, and passwords written in a shorthand you'd have to be me to read. A day later, the mail brought a change of address confirmation I hadn't requested, redirecting my letters to a P.O. box I'd never heard of. I held the card until the paper felt soft, then called the number and reported a fraudulent change, my voice calm in a way I couldn't feel yet. When I hung up, my phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Patel across the street. "Contractor just left your porch, tape measure, said demo starts Monday. That true?" My hands went cold. "No," I typed, then, "thank you." I called St. Agnes Senior Center and asked for the name of the elder law attorney who'd sat through an afternoon the previous fall teaching a dozen stubborn retirees how to keep their names from being used like a crowbar. Rita Gomez answered on the second ring. I could hear traffic in the background, or maybe just wind. "Bring me the red binder," she said. "This is why you made it." If I tell you that my daughter used to stand on the kitchen chair to help me frost cupcakes, that she used to sing off-key into a pink plastic microphone while I burned chicken and laughed anyway, that I saved the note she wrote me in second grade, promising never to grow up and leave me, will it make what I say about the rest easier to hear? Probably not. Love doesn't disappear when someone you love does something unlovable. It just changes shape. That's worse in some ways. It makes you tender when you should be sharp. Monday came black with rain, the kind of lake storm that arrives sideways. A moving truck idled at the far end of the street because a go with the worst timing I've ever seen refused to yield the middle of the road. Trent was on my porch wearing a rain jacket like a trophy. He held a clipboard that looked important enough to be power, and he smiled with the kind of smile a man wears when he's about to do something he can't wait to defend. "Morning, Evelyn," he said, friendly as a salesman. "Let's make this smooth, okay?" "Smooth like concrete," I said, and opened my door wide, for either a driveway or a grave. Kim flinched. "Mom, please don't make this harder." Rita's voice came from behind me, quiet and warm. "Good morning." She stepped into view the way a magician produces a coin from your ear. "Mr. Whitaker, Mrs. Whitaker, I'm Attorney Gomez. A few quick notes before anyone touches a single piece of furniture. 1. The documents you've brought are falsified. The medical letter is signed by a doctor who retired in 2019. We've confirmed it. 2. You do not have power of attorney. 3. My client is competent, oriented, and, in case we're going to discuss safety, has had the stove unplugged from the wall for 10 years. Trent looked at Kim like he'd miscounted on stage and realized the audience noticed. "We're just trying to do what's best," he said lightly. "And it's Mr. and Mrs. Whitaker, respect." "Respect would have been ringing the bell instead of measuring the living room when you thought nobody was home," Rita replied. By lunchtime, we had a court date. Trent had filed for emergency guardianship at the Bay County Courthouse. An emergency, he said, because I was a danger to myself and refused care. He attached a stack of papers that looked official until you read them, and 2 screenshots of text from me to Kim that made me sound confused when I'd been sarcastic. He did not include the text he sent me from Kim's phone when he took it for a second, the one that said, "Mom, you're scaring me," which I did not answer because I was on the phone with the post office making sure my mailbox stayed mine. The night before the hearing, I made soup because I needed to hold something in my hands that turned with attention into comfort. Chicken noodle with too much dill. The steam fogged the kitchen window. I unlabeled a jar and mailed the label to myself, a trick I learned from a woman on a mission trip in 1988 who swore by paper trails like some women swear by prayers. I slid a fresh page into the red binder, the Harbor Pharmacy printout with the fax header that traced the fraudulent prescription to a free online fax relay. I didn't understand every number on the header. Rita did. "Bring what you have," she said when she stopped by after dinner. She opened the binder, turned the plastic sleeves with hands that had seen this too many times, and smiled without any humor at the change of address form. "Busy boy. You okay?" "No," I said, because lying never made me brave. "But I can stand." "You won't have to stand alone," she said. On the way to the courthouse the next morning, Maple Harbor looked scrubbed. The storm had washed everything clean. Penny's diner had propped its door open with a sack of flour, and hot sugar air drifted out onto the sidewalk. Outside the courthouse, a woman in a sherbet-colored suit stood under the flagpole arguing into her phone about who forgot to file the feed schedule for the 4-H goats. Real life doesn't stop for the big thing. It rolls right alongside, tapping its foot. Inside, the hallway smelled like furniture polish and paper. Kim sat on a bench with a tissue folded small in her palm, and for a heartbeat I saw her in braces again, asking me to hold her hair for the school picture. Trent stood with one hand in his pocket like he'd finished something already. He nodded at me the way a man nods when he wants you to know he isn't frightened. Judge Avery Holt took the bench with a folder under his arm and librarian eyes. I have always liked people with librarian eyes. They look at what you bring them and decide it matters before they decide what it means. The hearing opened with a piano recital of legal words, quiet and proper. Trent's lawyer stood and began to perform the piece he'd practiced. The song went like this: a beloved matriarch deteriorating, a daughter devastated but realistic, the specter of safety, because safety is the new holy word you can hang anything on if you say it with enough reverence. He said I wandered, which is what people call walking your beagle if they want you to sound lost. He said I left the stove on, which is what people say when they've never met a woman with an unplug habit. He said I was paranoid about mail theft, which is what they call it when you notice your mailbox being hijacked. Then it was Rita's turn, and she did what women who have seen this too many times do. She didn't shout. She slid things forward with a little click against the table that felt like justice tapping its foot. The change of address card, the HOA notice I hadn't requested, a still from my doorbell camera of Trent measuring my living room with a tape measure he didn't pay for, a voicemail transcript from Cypress Grove's admissions director confirming that my son-in-law said he already had POA in place, the pharmacy fax header with arrows Rita had drawn on it with red pen because sometimes you make the path obvious so nobody can pretend they missed it. Then she set a small device on the table and pressed play. The courtroom filled with my kitchen, that plain space where people have told me the truth and lied to me across decades of Tuesdays. The audio played crisp as a glass snapping. By Monday, she'll be at Cypress Grove. The contractor can take this wall down. We'll get an open concept and flip in 60 days. Trent's voice followed, small. This is cruel, Trent. Cruel is leaving money on the table. And in the silent half-second afterward, you could hear a bailiff swallow. I recognized the sound from church, when the pastor says something you hope will land, and then it does. Mrs. Gomez, how was this recording obtained? In my client's kitchen, by my client. Lawful and admissible. The judge turned to Kim. Mrs. Whitaker, do you wish to speak? Kim stood without meaning to, and then tried to sit back down and missed the bench by an inch. She stayed on her feet. Your Honor, Use your own voice, the judge said gently. Kim ducked her head. I'm sorry, Mom, she said, but she was facing the bench. I was scared. He kept saying if I didn't be an adult, he'd leave. And I thought if we just got Mom into somewhere safe, it would stabilize things. I didn't want to hurt her. I thought I was helping. You thought wrong, the judge said, without meanness. But I appreciate your honesty. Trent laughed then, a sound like a spoon pinging off the edge of a glass. With respect, Your Honor, this is a family misunderstanding. That audio? She probably mistapped a button. She calls the remote a clicker. She's sweet, but... Mr. Whitaker, the judge said, and the room took a breath. You filed for emergency guardianship absent any evidence of emergency, prior to arranging a moving crew and a contractor. You attempted to obtain a controlled medication in another person's name, then misrepresented your authority to a care facility. This court denies your petition. Furthermore, the court refers this matter to the prosecutor's office for review. Effective immediately, a protective order prohibits you from Mrs. Carter's property and from representing yourself as having any authority over her affairs. The space between gavel and wood felt like the gap between thunder and lightning. One beat, then noise. Not from the judge, from the bodies in the room. A collective exhale that sounded like something unclenching. I didn't cheer. There is a version of me in some other woman's story who pumps her fist. In mine, I closed the red binder and slid my pen into the spine, the blue one with a chewed cap. Rita put 3 papers in front of me to sign. Revocation of any informal permissions, a postal hold, and an update to my beneficiary designation I should have made when Ray died, but couldn't look straight at. Outside on the courthouse steps, the wind had picked up. The flag overhead flapped hard enough to snap. Kim waited under it, wrapped in a cardigan that suddenly looked too thin. "Mom," she said, "I'm sorry." "I know. But sorry can't live here for a while. It can visit. It cannot move in." She nodded and took her keys to my house off her ring. Something burned at the edge of my eyes, but I didn't let it spread. She set the keys in my palm with the care you'd use for an egg. "If you'll let me, I'll earn it back." "Without him," I said. "Without him," she said. So quiet a person could have missed it. The next week, Maple Harbor continued as if my life hadn't just been tilted and set back down. The grocery store moved the cereal 2 aisles over because someone got a deal on shelving. Penny's Diner sold out of lemon meringue and apologized to nobody. Harbor Pharmacy taped a sign on the counter. "We confirm every controlled prescription. If we bug you, thank us later." Billy refused the Starbucks gift card I brought and took the lemon bars instead because her husband was diabetic, and dessert without frosting made him feel like he was getting away with something. I changed my locks. I called my insurance company and updated my file. I made copies of my red binder, printed on cheap paper to use like weather maps. Here's where the fronts come in. Here's where you'll need an umbrella. Here's the street that always turns into a river. I slept little, which is a polite way of saying I woke at 3 with a heart that thought it was a drum. I walked the house with Scout at my heel and made lists in my head of the things I could count. The cabinet doors, the loose plank in the hallway I never fixed because it sounds like an old friend sighing. The lemon tree leaves that glowed like small lanterns under the porch light. One night, unable to settle, I made biscuits at 2 a.m., the kitchen filled with flour haze. I hummed without meaning to. Humming is something the body does when it needs a mother, and there's only you. When I told my friend Ruth I wanted to start a workshop at the senior center, she thumped her mug on the Formica and said, "Finally, a club I'll attend." We called it Paperwork and Peace of Mind, because the other names we liked, Call the Police, Then Call Me, and the How Dare He Hour, didn't pass the church lady test. We taught a dozen women and 3 men how to organize the mess that modern life makes on purpose. Who to trust with your passwords, who not to, where to keep your deed, how to send that change of address back stamped, "Not today." We told them how to pick an agent who wouldn't sell their dining room on a lunch break. We fed them cookies because it helps. The first week, Kim stood outside the door and left. The second week, she sat in the back and didn't speak. The third week, she poured coffee to strangers with a practice hand and looked at me only once, quick, like a kid checking if the teacher's still mad. The fourth week, she raised her hand and said, "What if I already made big mistakes?" And nobody booed. A woman in a quilted vest patted the chair beside her and said, "Then you're about to make big repairs, sweetheart." You should know what came of Trent, because people always ask, as if a tale feels unfinished until the villain is made small. The prosecutor called Rita and asked for the file. Harbor Pharmacy flagged his name. Cypress Grove changed admissions procedures and added a new line to their intake script. Do you currently have a valid power of attorney? May we speak to them directly? The HOA sent an apology letter printed on paper so heavy my mailbox leaned. The realtor who left the flyer sent me a text that began, "I had no idea," and ended with, "That was unprofessional." And I let him feel lucky that I didn't reply. I heard through the Maple Harbor grapevine that Trent took a contract job 4 towns over and told people it was a mutual decision to part ways. The thing about folks who say just being honest is they never are, not to themselves.
Kim filed for divorce in June. The papers were boring, as survival often is. She found a little apartment over a hair salon on Maple Street, the kind with a stupid number of stairs and a window that looks into the branches of a tree. She came by on Sundays with a load of laundry and left with clean clothes and groceries she swore she would pay me for. I didn't keep the receipts or the shame. She brought me beets once, and I roasted them with olive oil and salt. And she said, "I never liked beets." And I said, "You never had them cooked by someone who loved you." We ate them with our fingers standing at the stove. On the morning in August when the heat finally broke, I found an envelope under my rubber welcome mat. It wasn't a threat or a bill or a glossy lie. It was a thank you note written in my friend Ruth's uneven hand. "You made me open a bank account in my own name at 59. Nobody ever made me feel that smart." I taped the note inside the red binder, where it crinkled under the plastic like a pressed leaf. St. Agnes Hospital invited me to tell my story at a lunchtime program in the lobby, near the cafeteria where teenagers raise money for marching band uniforms with brownies that make a person forgive anything. I said yes, because sunlight works on shame the way it works on mold. I stood by a collapsible podium that shuddered when the double doors opened and told a crowd of nurses and tired daughters and 2 men in work boots everything I've just told you. I didn't accept myself, the way people do when they tell stories about their own valor. I said, "I missed it. He told the truth when it was useful, then he told a new truth when it paid better. And I let him, because loving my daughter included loving the man she chose in a way that made me softer than I should have been." Afterward, a woman with perfect nails hugged me so hard my glasses squeaked. "I thought I was crazy," she said into my hair, her voice breathless with relief. "Turns out I was just alone." I started keeping a list in the red binder called Porch Light Project, a phone tree and knock on the door plan so nobody's mailbox gets hijacked without at least 3 neighbors noticing. We tied little ribbons to our porch lights, blue for those who wanted a check-in on Mondays, yellow for folks who didn't need noise but wouldn't mind a wave through the window. It looked silly. It worked. A life, after all, is mostly silly things that worked and the few that didn't with your name on them. When the leaves turned, the lemon tree stayed stubborn and green. I brought it inside and set it by the window, and the whole kitchen smelled like some other state. On a Friday in November, Kim knocked at dusk. Scout thumped his tail but didn't bother to get up, which means in Beagle, "You're forgiven, but not for the ham bone you refused to share." She held a lemon pie from Penny's in 2 hands like an offering. She said, "I brought a pie." I motioned her in, and we ate at the counter with forks straight from the drawer because plates felt too ceremonial. The meringue wept in the humidity the way meringue always does when you want it to behave, and neither of us apologized. Outside, someone down the block practiced trumpet scales, and I found I didn't mind the missed notes as much as I used to. "I forgive you," I said. It wasn't a trumpet blast. It was a porch light turned on at the time the person you're waiting for comes over the hill. "You don't get your old job back in my life, but a new one's open. It has a long probation and decent benefits. Interested?" Kim huffed out a laugh that turned into a small, mortified sob. "Yes, ma'am." She started coming to Paperwork and Peace of Mind on Tuesdays and to the Porchlight Committee on Thursdays. And on Sundays, she came with me to church and stood elbows length from me because closeness takes practice. I watched her learn to be alone without being lonely, a skill we should teach in grade school. She found a job at a tax prep place and learned to say, "I'll check on that," when she didn't know, instead of faking it until later. She went a whole week without crying, and then she cried right there at the counter while she copied photos from her phone to a flash drive for safekeeping, and I didn't say a blessed thing because sometimes the best thing you can do is stay quiet while someone wrings out the last of what drowned them. One Sunday after service, Judge Holt caught me by the coffee urn, and he said, "Mrs. Carter, I wanted you to know our court is piloting a checklist for emergency guardianship petitions. It's simple. Verify the doctor, confirm the POA, call the pharmacy. It will slow down the folks in a hurry and speed up the ones who are right." I said, "Good," and he nodded like a man who enjoys a quiet victory. Librarian eyes, like I said. In the spring, we planted 3 young maples in a line across the south end of the yard. The neighbors came with shovels and beer, and Ruth brought a jug of tea so sweet my molars ached. Kim stood next to me and asked if she could take the hole we marked with the blue flag. "Yes," I said, and she dug steady. Not strong, but steady, which is more useful anyway. That summer, the Porchlight plan expanded. We added a ribbon to the old Marlowe place when Mrs. Marlowe's son started dropping by with opportunities. We put one on the corner house when Mr. Forrester lost his wallet 3 times in 10 days and kept insisting he hadn't. We put one on mine, even though I was the one who started it. That's the thing about independence that nobody tells you. It works best when everyone around you agrees to help you keep it. The following winter, I received a letter from a woman whose name I won't repeat. She wrote that she watched my hospital talk on a live stream a friend sent, and she said she thought of not opening the email because she was that tired. She said her son had come home to help, and she let him sign papers she didn't understand because she was ashamed she didn't. She wrote, "I thought the shame was mine. Turns out I'd been given it and told to hold it for him." She took the letter to her bank. She brought her sister-in-law to Paperwork and Peace of Mind on Tuesday in February, and they sat in the back and made a plan to change her mail back, to call the attorney, to breathe even when breathing felt like crossing a river. A month later, she sent me a photo of her kitchen table covered in paperwork sorted into piles like laundry. The caption read, "The house I bought with my husband when we were young is mine again. My son can come for dinner. He cannot come for my dignity." When Kim asked if she could bring a man to church the following summer, she said it the way people say, "I might have broken something of yours." I said yes without asking who he was. He turned out to be a quiet person named Joel, who repaired lawn mowers for a living and thought strong coffee constituted dessert. He listened more than he spoke, and when he did speak, he didn't use words as decorations. After one service, he carried the heavy thing nobody wanted to carry down the basement stairs without announcing it. "I don't need attention," he said when someone thanked him. "I need a nap." I liked him. I kept it to myself.
By the time the leaves turned again, the red binder had a new first page. It wasn't dramatic. It was a list of names under the title Porchlight Project and a calendar that matched knocks and calls with people who had promised to put their bodies where their mouths were. Later, Rita added a page with 3 steps printed so big my friend Ruth said she could read them without her glasses. Confirm the doctor, confirm the pharmacy, confirm the stories. One afternoon, I stopped at Harbor Pharmacy and found Billy at the counter using a label gun like a tiny jazz trumpet. "We're adding little green verified dots to new prescriptions for patients over 65, she said. "It's low tech, but high comfort." "I'll take comfort however it comes," I said. A week after Thanksgiving, Kim knocked again near dusk. She brought no pie, only herself, and she stood there with her hands shoved in her coat pockets. "I got scared today," she said, looking at my doormat instead of me. "A realtor called my office and pitched me a flip and sell land deal with an upfront fee, and I almost said yes because he sounded like he knew me. He used my name 5 times in one sentence. I hung up. Then I sat in the break room and shook for 15 minutes. I opened the door wider and stepped aside. Scout rolled off his bed with the grace of an old dog and rumbled over for an ear scratch. "Come in," I said. She did. We sat at the counter again because that's where most truces happen in my house. Kim wrapped both hands around her coffee mug. "I hate that I can still be the kind of person it's easy to trick," she said. "You aren't. You're the kind of person it used to be easy to trick. You're also the kind who learns." She nodded, and we let the quiet be what it was, proof of something rebuilt, without fanfare. On the first warm day of the next April, I took the lemon tree back outside and told it plainly that I expected blossoms. "You've had enough of my attention," I said. "Time to give back." When the first white star opened, the whole port smelled like a summer we hadn't reached yet. Mrs. Patel came over with a jar of her garam masala and told me to put a pinch in my chicken salad, and I did. And we sat on my steps eating sandwiches that tasted like both of our kitchens. A few weeks later, I got a voicemail from a number I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Carter, this is Detective Allen from the county office. Just wanted to let you know the case we referred has been resolved." Without details, I can say the message traveled. "I appreciate the call," I said on the return line. He sounded surprised that I didn't want more. The older I get, the more I understand that information is heavy, and you don't have to lift everything a stranger offers. One evening, Kim arrived with a lemon pie and a stack of envelopes. "Not bills," she quickly said. "Don't worry, letters." She'd volunteered to read thank you notes out loud after the paperwork and peace of mind class because my voice gave out if I spoke more than a couple hours, and because people write honest things to someone they'll never meet in person. She sat at the counter and opened envelopes, and she read about a woman teaching her brothers the difference between concern and control, about a man who moved back home to take care of his father and insisted his cousins show their IDs before they took tools from the garage, about a church secretary who brought a stack of POA forms to the pastor and said, "We're doing this together on Thursday night." Sometimes I think we imagine justice as a dragon slain once to great applause. It's smaller than that, no less holy. It's a pile of letters held closed by a rubber band. It's a lemon tree blooming in a place it shouldn't. It's a judge with library eyes piloting a simple checklist. It's a woman who used to apologize 10 days a day, saying once, no. On a Sunday in high summer, with the maple stretching shade like generosity, Kim looked up from her plate and asked, "Mom, do you ever miss the years when it was just you and Dad and me and nothing hard had happened yet?" "I do," I said, because lying never made me brave. Every once in a while, I want 1 hour back. You with purple jelly on everything, your father laughing at his own joke, me wearing that apron with the rooster that never fit. Then I want now, even when now hurts, especially when it doesn't. "What if I mess up again?" she asked. "You will. But you'll do it with your eyes open, and I won't make myself smaller to help you unsee it." She smiled then, not like a child, not like someone wrung out, like a person. Deal. The following autumn, a new couple moved into the corner house with a toddler who ran with his arms windmilling like he was trying to take off. On Halloween, Kim and I sat on my porch handing out mini candy bars while Scout judged costumes through half-closed eyes, and the toddler, dressed like a bumblebee, toddled up my walkway. His mother yelled from the sidewalk, "Say trick or treat, Eli." He said it like it was one word. I handed him a mini Snickers. He stared at it, then at me, then launched into a solemn monologue in a language composed entirely of vowels. I nodded with equal solemnity. "I agree." Later, after the porch light had gone off and the candy bowl sat empty like proof that joy had been here, I stood at the sink and listened to the house breathe. Houses do that with their settling bones and the soft hum of appliances you barely notice. I thought about all the conversations my kitchen had heard over 30 years, the arguments and birthday songs, the late-night confessions over cereal, the phone calls that change a life but sound ordinary at the time. I placed the red binder on the counter, opened it, and slid in a new page at the front. A single sentence in block letters that I plan to read the day my memory refuses to jog when I call it, "We are not helpless in our own homes." The winter after that, a storm knocked the power out for 2 days. The neighborhood glowed with candles and gas fireplaces and the blue light of cell phones used as lanterns. I made a pot of chili on my gas stove and carried a bowl across the street to Mrs. Patel, who handed me half a loaf of bread she'd baked in her Dutch oven like a pioneer. Kim slept on my couch under the quilt my mother pieced from dresses we couldn't afford to keep and couldn't bear to give away. We listened to the transistor radio from the emergency kit, and the announcer's voice wavered in and out as he told us which roads were clear, which were clogged with downed branches, which would require patience. At 10 that night, as the wind howled and the maple in the front yard groaned like an old ship, Kim spoke into the dark. "Mom," she said, "I'm here." I said, "I'm not who I was." "I know," I said. "And you're not who you were either." "No," I said. "I'm stronger. Less nice." She snorted. Later, after the porch light had gone off and the candy bowl sat empty like proof that joy had been here, I stood at the sink and listened to the house breathe. Houses do that with their settling bones and the soft hum of appliances you barely notice. I thought about all the conversations my kitchen had heard over 30 years, the arguments and birthday songs, the late-night confessions over cereal, the phone calls that change a life but sound ordinary at the time. I placed the red binder on the counter, opened it, and slid a new page at the front. A single sentence in block letters that I plan to read the day my memory refuses to jog when I call it. "We are not helpless in our own homes." The winter after that, a storm knocked the power out for 2 days. The neighborhood glowed with candles and gas fireplaces and the blue light of cell phones used as lanterns. I made a pot of chili on my gas stove and carried a bowl across the street to Mrs. Patel, who handed me half a loaf of bread she'd baked in her Dutch oven like a pioneer. Kim slept on my couch under the quilt my mother pieced from dresses we couldn't afford to keep and couldn't bear to give away. We listened to the transistor radio from the emergency kit, and the announcer's voice wavered in and out as he told us which roads were clear, which were clogged with downed branches, which would require patience. At 10 that night, as the wind howled and the maple in the front yard groaned like an old ship, Kim spoke into the dark. "Mom," she said. "I'm here," I said. "I'm not who I was." "I know," I said. "And you're not who you are either." "No," I said. "I'm stronger. Less nice." She snorted. "You were never nice. You were kind. There's a difference. Keep going," I said. "You're on a roll." She laughed and then sighed, the kind that empties a person out. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For not letting me make you smaller than you are." I lay there in the dark with my child breathing even, the radio whispering road conditions to nobody, the house humming with a quiet I'd earned. And I thought about the word forgiveness, how people think it means forgetting. It doesn't. It means weaving memory into a blanket sturdy enough to keep you warm without lighting it on fire. It means watching the person who hurt you pick up a hammer and build. It means knowing where your red binder is and using it when you need to. By the time the lemon tree bloomed again, the porch light project had expanded beyond our block. A woman in the next town over called to borrow our template. A church 2 counties away asked if they could copy our handouts. Rita's email pinged late one night with a message from a state official who wanted to talk about training hospital social workers to recognize the difference between concerned family and controlling family, which sometimes looks like identical twins until you ask a second question. Not long after, I was back at St. Agnes Hospital, this time at a small ceremony none of us wanted to call a ceremony. They gave me a thank you plaque shaped like a little house. On the back, someone had etched a sentence I recognized. "Love without boundaries becomes permission for harm. Love with boundaries becomes a lighthouse." I'd said it one Tuesday at Paperwork and Peace of Mind when a woman cried and called herself cruel for telling her nephew he could not take a second flat-screen TV out of her den. I don't remember saying it. They were my words anyway, the way most of the good things I've said were borrowed from other women's mouths. Later that evening, I carried the plaque home under my arm. I set it on the mantel next to a photo of Ray holding a fish he pretended was bigger than it was. I made tea and sat in my favorite chair and listened to the wind move through the maple leaves. Kim texted goodnight with a photo of a pie she'd overbaked by a minute and the caption, "Learning." I texted back a photo of the lemon tree and the caption, "Also learning." You might want me to tell you that I never feel afraid now, that the hearing cured anything in me that could be manipulated, that the porch light glows like a magic charm that keeps wolves away. It doesn't. Some nights I wake and my heart insists there is a threat, and my kitchen insists there is only the refrigerator running and the street light angling through the blinds. Some days I put the red binder on the table just to rest my palm on it. It is not sacred. It is a tool. So are we. The last time Kim brought a lemon pie from Penny's, we ate it with our forks straight from the tin like heathens. We laughed with our mouths full, and we told each other the truest versions of our days. Hers full of tax forms and green tea and the relentless math of ordinary life. Mine full of letters and phone calls and the way the light lands at 3 o'clock on the red binder like a blessing. When we were done, she washed the forks and set them on the towel to dry, and stood with her hands on the counter like she needed the counter to tell her where to be. She looked at me and didn't look away. "I love you," she said, which is not a spell, not a ransom, not a sword, just a sentence, steady as a bridge. "I love you" back and meant it without letting it do anything it ought not. When she left, I turned on the porch light and stood there for a minute under its warm halo, the lemon tree glowing like a lit bush, the maples throwing tall shadows across the lawn. Down the block, a television flashed blue against the living room wall, and a trumpet practiced scales off key. Somewhere a dog barked at a thing it couldn't see. I went inside and slid the red binder back into its spot on the second shelf. I didn't push it all the way to the wall. I left it where I could reach it. I boiled water and made tea and sat in my chair with the window cracked to invite the night in. The house breathed. I breathed back. And for the first time in a while, I fell asleep without a list in my hands, knowing if there was a list to be made tomorrow, I had a pen for it, and a binder, and a porch light, and a town where the word neighbor still means more than anything. We see you. We see you, and we will not let anyone carry you off on a lie.